You know, I've got some notes here, but David, your comments are, I think, going to direct me in a different direction this morning. I don't think I'm going to read from here. You know my commitment on parks, and David spoke about park equity, and because there are hundreds of parks within our city that need our support, because literally parks can change a neighborhood. And much of that funding for our parks, in many ways, will come from the city. And then David spoke about green space and flood mitigation, and that's critically important. And then he touched on the third element, and that's budgets, because that's important. And one thing that I've talked with many of you who have contributed handsomely from your own pockets, is that you don't want to invest in parks without there being maintenance. Because you can invest, but the question is, how do we maintain? And then oftentimes we've talked about, and what will the city contribute after you've made your investment? And so I want to talk about something that's important, even as it relates to parks this morning, and to this group especially, and that is Park A, called Proposition A, and Park B, called Proposition B. Because what happens on Proposition A and B will directly impact your contribution as it relates to all of our parks. Because it's about budgets, and it's about what the city can afford, and these are important issues. Proposition A, rebuild Houston, not raising anybody's fees, not increasing anybody's taxes. It's just a dedicated fund for streets, drainage, and flooding. You vote for it, you dedicate the funding. You vote against it, it's not dedicated, and mayors and future city councils can divert those resources elsewhere. You don't want that. So Proposition A is good. Proposition A is good. Proposition B, it's a little bit more testy. I love my firefighters, all 4,000 of them, but I've had to negotiate 3 employee agreements this year. My municipal workers, the people who work in your parks, the people who pick up your trash, the people who work on the streets, a 6% pay raise over 3 years, 3, 2, and 1. These are your park people. Steve Wright, the director, is right here, okay? Our police officers, those in many ways who are patrolling the areas. 2-year agreement, 7%, 4 and 3. My firefighters that I deeply love, I've offered them 9.5%, 4, 3 like police, and another 2.5. They have rejected that. They're asking you in Proposition B to mandate the city to give them a pay raise in the first year now of 29%, costing the city of Houston more than $100 million. And even the comptroller says that's not sustainable. I want you to bear something in mind. If you hold the city under the revenue cap and you raise the city's bottom line by more than $100 million, and we have to balance our books, where will the money come from? Which means you're going to have to lay off some people, okay? It's always difficult to lay off classifieds, fire, and police, but if you're forced to lay off municipal workers, that includes people who work in the parks, people who work in the libraries, people who are picking up the trash. That impacts the city's overall performance. Proposition B is not good. A is good, and B is bad. And I say that to say this. If we want a city that will go from where we are to where we need to be, if we want park equity, if we value our green space, and if we are trying to build complete communities, so that communities that have been underserved and under-resourced whose neighborhood parks need to be improved. The city cannot afford to expend $100 million on pay raises for any employee group, whether it's police, whether it's fire, whether it's municipal workers. And having the general public to make management employee decisions through referendum is not good public policy. And if this one goes through, the next time it will be police or will be municipal workers. Because if you're having a hard time standing up to say no to the firefighters because they show up for EMS and fire and floods, you're going to have a hard time saying no to police too, because they're the ones who protect us. You elected me to be your mayor, and you elected me to make some hard decisions. Well, this one is a decision that you have to make, because you are being asked to step in my shoes. And what I'm asking you, do not impose a financial liability on the city that the city cannot afford. I'm asking you to invest in your city by investing in a campaign to say no. And irrespective of what the polls may say, the question is, what's in the best interest of this city? And if there was any time for leadership to stand up, that time is right now. And so I want to thank you for your presence. I want to thank you for what you have contributed. But let's protect the investment by making sure that we have a city that stands on financial integrity and is stable enough to sustain and enhance the investment that you have made. Because it doesn't make any sense to have green space if you don't have the employees to help to maintain it. So A is good, B is bad, and the city will be brighter if the right decisions are made. Thank you.